Okay, week 10 of college football, previewing the biggest games coming. And of course, I'm joined today by Preston Grant of the PG Show and a new face here on the channel, Drew England. Guys, before we get into all of the topics we have today, I want to give y'all a chance to introduce yourself. Let everybody know where they can find all of your great content. Preston, I want to start with you. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Yeah, I'm Preston. I'm the host of the PG Show. Y'all can find me on YouTube, Apple, Google, or Spotify. Just the PG Show, all one word. You guys can find me on Twitter, the PG Show _. We're lining up a bunch of great content for you guys. New interviews. Just dropped a new one today with Jonah Laululu. So go check that one out. Real nice.
Thanks for having me on, Ty. I'm Drew England. I do a podcast with a friend of mine. It's the Under Official Review podcast. We just do basically kind of like Ty and their forum. We talk about college football across the board, from coast to coast, any teams, all the big games, kind of a college game day type of format. We love to have fun. We've actually had Ty on the show, stuff like that. We just love talking college football, and so of course I'm going to give the horns down as well because I'm an OU fan, but. Yeah, just excited to get in already week 10. It's crazy. So yeah, love to get into it and talk this week. So
Absolutely doesn't even seem real that we're at week 10, but there's a lot for us to get into. Guys, there's one thing that happened this weekend, this week, that I was surprised by. So surprised that I made a video that's typically a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. I think people that have come to know what my content is, I try and do very much, well, just straight up analysis and not too much drama content. But there was some slander on a coach that I hold in very high regard. I think if you've been around my channel before, you know exactly how good of a coach I think Todd Bates is, from a recruiter to a defensive line coach to what he meant to Clemson. I just think he's one of the best options in the nation. But Oklahoma has had some misses on the defensive line. Now, guys, we were talking about this before the camera got rolling. None of us are super surprised, but people are kind of sounding the alarm. I say people, it's a select group. It's not indicative of the Oklahoma fan base, of course, but there's some people sounding the alarm, and it got more traction than I ever believed it would. Guys, I put out a video, very simply put. I'll keep this brief. I want to hear from both of you. The way I look at this is Todd Bates has been at Oklahoma for a year. Yes, Bates recruited well at Clemson. He is not Clemson any longer. And Oklahoma is a fantastic institution. There is no questioning this. Oklahoma is trying to fit in a new head coach, new scheme, new offensive. There's a lot of new going on there. So, of course, whenever it comes down to Larry Johnson in Ohio State or Alabama, you're not going to fault these kids whenever they're going to the most consistent programs we've seen. And when we're talking Alabama, maybe the most consistent run of dominance ever in college football, right? That's not saying that guy can't recruit. You just lost to Nick Saban. Nick Saban doesn't have the turnover Oklahoma had last year, right? Guys, I want to hear from you because I think Oklahoma is in an absolutely fine spot. I get it. The defensive line recruiting is what everybody wants to see. It'll come. We have people such as War Hero right now saying Bates will flip Hicks. I know, PG, you're big on that train. But guys, talk to me. What are we thinking about Todd Bates? Is the criticism, is the sounding of the alarm valid? PG, I want to start with you.
Yeah, we've said it. The sounding of the alarm is not valid. I get it. There were a lot of unrealistic expectations that fans had set for the program, for the staff, and for the players that honestly probably should have never been there when this coaching change happened. And I'm not going to lie, I fell victim to the same thing. I really expected for this team to, win 11 or 12 games this year. Well, look at it. We might be at best 10 wins. I think the idea here that Bates was just going to come in and, land all of these elite defensive linemen, it was unrealistic. We are not, in the past, 10, 15, 12, 13 years, Oklahoma has not historically been a school where we're known for defense. And the Big 12 hasn't been known for that either. I would say probably it really started to fall out in the 2010, 2011 years. That's really where you started to see the defense in the Big 12 kind of fall off, and OU and Texas specifically on the defensive side of the ball. And,
if I may, PG, I just want to interject real quick because I love where you're going, but I would argue this. I don't know it's so much that defense as a whole fell off in the Big 12. I think it did statistically, but I think that's as a result of the spread offense and the revolution of offensive football that took place a lot in the Big 12, certainly in the Pac, but we really saw that happen in the Big 12. And I can prove that when Missouri and A&M move, right, it gives the SEC defenses problems, and that's one of the best things that ever happened to the SEC, getting in A&M and Missouri, because it made their defenses shift to be able to account for this spread offense. I just wanted to point that because I think people harp on Big 12 defense, but not enough credit is given to the level of offense that was present in that league.
Well, and you never saw that the no huddle, spread it out, rip the ball down the field like you saw in the late 2000s, early teens with Texas Tech, like you said, Missouri, Chase Daniel, some of those guys that were coming in, and there was and I don't think enough credit, like to Ty's point, was given to some of those offenses, even some of the offenses that we had at Oklahoma, where we were snapping the ball and running 80, 90 plays of offense and everything. And, and it's just, it's hard. It puts strain on the defense. And, but yeah, to your point, absolutely. I think you have to give some credit to some of those offenses.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point, and I'm probably about to totally shatter my point here because it was something that a lot of teams had to adjust, and you saw Big 12 teams go out of conference and do really well against non-Big 12 teams, right? Because they're playing against a spread offense, they know how to do it, and then they were able to go out there and, play at the level or at least close to the level of some of the other teams. But I mean, ideally, if I'm a recruit and I'm watching how Oklahoma's defense has been over the past 10 or 12 years, I don't want to come play here. I don't care if Bates and Venables are here because I feel like your NFL scouts, and I mean, you might think I'm wrong on this, Ty, are less likely to look at a place like the Big 12 for top tier defensive linemen and defensive talent over a place like in the SEC, ACC, or the Big 10, where
I don't think you're
producing
wrong.
national championships over the past 10 or 12 years. Yeah. And so I think that's something that goes into consideration, which is why I think we lost, several guys to some of these other programs. Now, I don't understand why Oklahoma fans are, acting like it's a big deal that we lost Peter Woods and Vic Burley and some of those guys to Clemson when, they were offered when Bateson came here, but they never even took a visit. And quite honestly, were probably never even in consideration with Oklahoma. We lost Jordan Renaud to Alabama, but it literally came down to who was going to develop him better. Realistically, either place would have developed him just fine. He probably just went with the winningest program out of the two over the past 10 or 12 years.
Or a team that's won, national championships year after year, it seems like.
Yeah.
So,
and with David Hicks, I'm all in. I think David Hicks is still Oklahoma, and I still think Oklahoma has a great 2023 class. I think they're still going to be somewhere in a 305 to 310 range. I'll let y'all figure out who's going in and who's not on those rankings, but I still think we have a good shot at David Hicks. I don't think we're out of that race. I fully believe that, on National Signing Day, David Hicks is a Sooner.
I would definitely love it. But yeah, like even to the point that you were making with defensive talent and wanting to make that next step as you're a high school football player. And as for me, I coach high school football, so I see it week in and week out where there's that steady, progression, whether you're going from high school to college, and then you want to position yourself from when you get into college to get to that next step, to get to the NFL. And right now, Oklahoma is not a really great option for defensive linemen getting to the next level. I mean, a lot of people may not, like me for that, but I mean, right now our track record, we had Benito. We had Perion Winfrey last year, but beyond that, I mean, we had Neville Gallimore, I think a couple years ago, but other than that, we haven't really had that big physical, dude on the defensive line in a long time. And so, for fans out there, I'm with you, PG. I just say, hey, let's see how it goes. Let's establish a track record. And I think by having Bates, by having Brent Venables, by having that staff in place, I think you have that ability to establish a track record here over the next few years. And yes, going into the SEC is going to help and everything like that. And so I think that our time is going to come. But right now, a lot of these recruits, yeah, why wouldn't you be looking at Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, some of these other schools that have put quality elite D linemen in the league?
And it's not even going into the league.
Yep.
Just wait for Oklahoma in the next 5 years to win a national championship.
Sure. Yep.
Wait for that to
Absolutely.
happen, because when that happens, the floodgates are open again.
Most
And
definitely.
in 2024, we talk about all the time how this 2024 class is going to be the class for Venables and the team here. And
Yep.
it's 100% true, right? Because there's so many guys that they're just it would be ridiculous if they missed on these guys. David Stone, Zena Yumiozulu from Allen, Texas, the Williams kid up there from Lee Summit North.
Yep.
You've got Zadavian Sims, Eddie Pierre-Louis. You have Kavion Henderson, and those are just a couple of them. You still got guys like T.A. Cunningham and guys like that.
If we come out here and we finish the year with 9 or 10 wins after the start that we had, after the 3 games that we dropped, and you start seeing improvement on the defense and guys that are saying, oh, well, if they can do that in year 1, what is it going to be like for me when I'm a freshman or a sophomore coming into this system and they've been established? So, yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that.
Especially if they play like they did last week against Iowa State, where you pretty much just destroy their running game, which I will say
that's a good win. That's a good win.
Over the past couple of years, Oklahoma's running defense has not been that bad. I mean, they've had glimpses of where they can go out there and shut somebody down.
Definitely struggled on the back end more so in the run defense for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. And if anybody's going to rip anything, that's where I think people should be getting upset. It's hey, like, we've got to land Peyton Bowen right
now. Here is where I do disagree. I think one game y'all have been better in the run. Up until that point, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Oklahoma rated like 121st in college football in rush defense?
Yeah, we were just talking about years before.
Games. Yeah, the first three games, the first 3 games weren't terrible. It was mainly that Kansas State, Texas, and TCU stretch that killed us. But like last year, I didn't feel like our run defense was awful. Like I felt like when they needed to hold, they could hold.
Yeah, we were definitely giving up bigger plays through the air the last few years under Alex Grinch than any big type of runs. I was always scared of all right, here we go. The teams are going to keep taking shots against our small corners and everything like that. And so, but yeah, our run defense, has struggled a little bit, but you're always going to get that with a new scheme and going to a different, different terminology, different things like that. And you're just going to have to settle in. And I think hopefully, with that Iowa State game, hopefully with Kansas, the way we've done things, we're starting to settle in, starting to figure it out, starting to, gel as a unit over there. And hopefully, tomorrow we'll take another step in the right direction.
Yeah. If the defensive line can just get to the quarterback a little more, which I got a chance to talk to Jonah about yesterday. This looks like a completely different team. Absolutely. The defense looks completely different. But the back end of the defense, that has been the problem for the defense. And that's, I think, going for the future, going to be probably Oklahoma's hardest time. You got to be able to get in on some of those races for a Desmond Ricks and people like that. And right now, we're not there. Alabama is like this when it comes to Desmond Ricks, and OU is like this.
Yeah. Well, and then you mentioned Peyton Bowen. A guy like that would be huge coming into the secondary and being able to play like that. And, starting to get those type of guys, it has a domino effect on other people.
Yeah. And here's the thing. It might not look pretty in the recruiting classes, especially on the defensive line, but it might happen through the transfer portal, because I think it's easier to convince a guy that's been in the league to come to a place like OU, right, through the transfer portal than it is to tell a recruit to come to OU, right, when they've never been in the college game. So it might take some transfer portal success, turning those guys into the league, making OU college football playoff contenders with those guys to be able to convince recruits, hey, you should come here and play with us. Our defense is better.
Yep.
And I want to go to two things here, and I do want to hit some comments while we have the opportunity. Unfair, Jay is with us. Guys, if y'all don't check out Jay's content, if you're not aware of Unfair Sports, go check it out. Fantastic stuff over there. Always super entertaining, always great insight. Jay says, I disagree talking about offensive football and how it ranks in terms of what you can get done. He says the last few years, offense has won chips more than defense. Go look at the scores. Bama's putting up numbers. Clemson put up numbers. Georgia put up numbers. Here's where I'm going to push back a little bit, Jay, because you're right. Teams are scoring, but we haven't seen a team devout of a defense be able to do that in the college football playoffs. I think the best we can point to is either the Auburn national championship with Kevin Steele, right? I think that's of the last few teams that have won a national championship. I think Auburn's defense with Kevin Steele came in at number 56 in the nation, and that was one of the lowest we've seen from a national championship winning defense. And other than that was Joe Brady and Joe Burrow's LSU team, which that offense was, I mean, let's be real. That's like the Bulls, right, of college football when you look at that offense. So I hear you. You're definitely not wrong, but I don't think that we can also be like, oh, well, this is what worries me about Tennessee, right? This is exactly what worries me about Tennessee. I know you can score, but what about the defensive side of the football? And we're going to talk some Tennessee here in a bit. I also wanted to get into who Oklahoma is playing this weekend, which is Baylor, a game I think at the beginning of the year, a lot of people would have been much more interested in than we are now, because I think a lot of people wouldn't have believed we're talking about two teams fighting for their place in the Big 12 as opposed to two teams fighting for the top of the Big 12. Let's be very clear when we're talking about Baylor, guys. Whenever we're talking Baylor, we have to give credence to Dave Aranda. If you're talking young coaches in college football that we would hedge bets on with a bright future, I mean, can we get through 5 names without mentioning Dave Aranda? I certainly couldn't. I don't think I could. I've had a lot of respect for what he did at LSU, especially when he worked with Corey Raymond. If y'all don't know what those two did together, I mean, they had shutdown defenses, but Baylor has had an up and down year, right? Baylor has had some shifting parts. It's a very big opportunity for the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, we talked about something, Drew, you brought it up, and I want to piggyback off of it. What do you do from here on out if you're Oklahoma is the most important thing that could happen? Whether you make a bowl game or not, that's great. That's great. What's more impactful is if a recruit can sit there and say, hey, after they struggled week after week, I watched them get better. I watched them play football that's more conducive to success, and I can see the vision that's being pitched to me. This is why right now we all have to be watching A&M. If you're someone who thinks, oh, well, Hicks could flip from A&M, you have to be watching A&M, because if they can't find that positive momentum, I'm not saying Hicks is going to flip. I'm saying it's exponentially more difficult to keep him. So this is why this is a big game for Oklahoma. Now, guys, we saw Oklahoma last week handle Iowa State, and I was of the mindset before that game happened that if Oklahoma got a win against Iowa State, that's a bigger win than a lot of people would give Oklahoma credit for, because I got to keep it 100%. I said when Texas beat Iowa State, that was a bigger win than people were giving Texas credit for. Guys, that Iowa State defense is legit, and there is no other way to put it. Talk to me, PG. I want to hear what you thought. 1, what you saw from Oklahoma coming out of the bye against Iowa State, and 2, what you're thinking going into Baylor.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I think you really noticed about Oklahoma coming out of the bye is the fresh legs, right? You saw the players just seem like they had more energy, and you heard it from the guys. They had a good time being able to take some time off, which I think was really the first time they've had any significant time off since fall camp. And so going this late into the season with having a bye week, that's going to hurt you. I really liked how the defense definitely showed some significant improvement. Sorry, the dog must hear somebody out there.
It's all
But the
good.
defense, the defense definitely showed some significant improvement because, and I know people will look at it and go, "Hey, you gave up 308 yards or whatever it was through the air," but listen, Deckers had to throw 30 or complete 37 attempts on 57 passes to be able to do that, and that's a little under almost 5.5 yards a game, or 5.5 yards a throw. So I felt like the defense played really well, and I would expect for them to be able to carry some of that momentum going into the Baylor game. And then so far throughout the rest of the season, I expect the defensive line to be able to go in there and shut down Baylor's running game like they did against Iowa State, make it a focus, and make Blake Shapen, who I believe, which other people have said as well, is very similar to Hunter Deckers. Make him go out there, make him throw the ball, make him beat you, but make sure Reese is not able to run all over you, right? Go out there, put a stout 4-man front, make them beat you. Make them beat you through the air.
Yeah, love it.
Some things that I was encouraged by coming out of the bye for sure was the ability, like PG said, fresh legs. I think to get away from football a little bit, especially after our struggles. Yeah, we did beat Kansas, but being able to hit the reset button, to be able to kind of get away and to take a breath and get healthy, get some guys in some good shape. I know Billy Bowman played a few snaps. That was good to see him back. But one thing that I was really encouraged by, obviously the defense only giving up 66 yards on the ground to Iowa State. I thought Iowa State would be able to run the ball a little bit better, but obviously, and then a couple really key, third and short, fourth and short stops that we had. My buddy Deshaun White, who I talked to quite a bit, had a really great game. I think he had 14 total tackles, a couple really big stops there, and then the defense was able to get some turnovers into. Especially on the back end, 3 interceptions. And Eric Gray in our run game has come along so well the last couple games. Eric Gray, another 100-yard day for him.
You'll get me on a whole tangent with Eric Gray.
Yeah, and so it was good to see him continue to build that confidence. And another thing, I think this game should have been, it could have been a bigger. More of a blowout because we did leave some points on the field. We had a few drops. Marvin struggled a little bit. Dylan missed a few throws, but man, we could have very easily had over 40 points and maybe a half 100 in that game. But I mean, really solid day all around. But I was encouraged, and then going into this game, I think it's the same kind of formula. I think we're going to have to establish the line of scrimmage. I think we're going to have to get Eric Gray going. Hopefully Javonte Barnes is back. Maybe if not, Marcus Major. But our offensive line has really done well. I think the last it's kind of been the silver lining to a little bit of a struggle this year is our offensive line has played pretty well. And so that's some more things I'm looking at going into tomorrow is can the offense keep clicking and the run game going, and can the defense capitalize and have another good day getting some stops, getting some turnovers.
Yeah, as Jay puts it here, I will go off about Eric Gray. Drew, I don't know if you ever heard, I've been a huge Eric Gray fan since he first transferred to Oklahoma. And I get it, last year wasn't a big year. And we talked about this right before you came in here, and this is what I always told Jay. Whenever I'd be talking to Oklahoma fans, Oklahoma content creators, I always got this feeling that, well, last year a lot of the struggles came because our coaching staff was half checked out. And I think that that's valid, right? I don't think that there is a lot of illegitimacy to that. The one player, though, I always felt was never given that same benefit of the doubt as a lot of the other guys was Eric Gray. Because every time I'd talk about Eric Gray, it's, oh, well, look what he did last year. And in my mind, I'd always be like, yeah, but for all these other players, I was told to disregard what happened last year. So for Eric Gray, why is that? And now we're seeing, guys, DeMarco wanted him for a reason.
Sure. Well, you also had a lot of people forget that you had a guy in Kennedy Brooks.
True.
A couple 1,000-yard seasons and was already established as a running back. Yes, you're going to give that guy the ball. You want to get that guy the ball. And I think a lot of people were like, well, why isn't, Eric Gray this? Well, Eric didn't really get a lot of opportunity to really be that featured back like he has been this year. And so I think a lot of that had to do with just the ability to get on the field consistent. He did get in, he did catch some passes out of the back. He had a pretty productive year last year, but I think a lot of people are quick to, like you said, draw that and be like, well, why didn't he show up last year? What was his struggles? And the offensive line wasn't, I don't think, as good as they were this year,
True.
But
I agree.
A lot of that had to do with Kennedy Brooks and just his seniority and longevity that he's been and that he's had in our program.
And I agree with you here, Waro. And just like you said, Drew, when you have Kennedy Brooks, let's be very forthright here. I like Eric Gray. Kennedy Brooks has proved it in an Oklahoma uniform. No doubt about that. And Matt, I 100% agree with you. We saw people would say, well, why can't he run through the middle? Like, why can't he run right between the nose guard and the center. It's like, well, guys, maybe he's more of an out the back change of pace. Like, and now I think the extra weight, boom. Matt, I'm going to take your logic here and take it one step further. What Schmitty's done with the O-line has been great. Let's talk about what Schmitty has done with Eric Gray.
Yeah.
That the muscle he put on this offseason has been noticeably different with him running in between the tackles. But even his ability to be a change of pace guy, I just think is really big for Oklahoma. Now, here's one thing I will not push back on, but I think it's going to be much more difficult, or at least in theory, I think it'll be more difficult to stop Baylor's rush attack than Iowa State's. Because, guys, Iowa State hasn't had a real semblance of a rush attack much this year. I mean, they haven't had much of an offense, but at the same time, I think Baylor's better equipped. But I also think that the momentum for Oklahoma is a real tangible thing, something that could be big. Now, I want to stay in the Big 12 here, right? Because I think there's a team in the Big 12 that's being a little bit overlooked here. And I think that everything will right itself, but we need to talk about it. That's TCU. Guys, I got a very good friend. I was on the phone with him a long time last night. Denzel Johnson played safety for Gary Patterson in TCU and did it at the highest level in college football, went on to play in the NFL. Man, TCU, they're good. How wild is it, guys, that an institution such as TCU, and this is what Denzel and I were talking about, how wild is it that they fire their legendary head coach, Gary Patterson, who took them from a good institution to TCU, and instantly within a few years, they're right back to being at the top of the Big 12 with Sonny Dykes. Like, how rare is that to have that kind of luck? Preston, Drew, I want to hear what y'all are thinking about TCU. How good are the Frogs? PG, I'll start with you.
Yeah, the Frogs are real good this year, and they're really explosive on offense. You've been able to see them go in there and just shred up everybody they've played. Now their defense is still giving up. I'd say in conference play, it looks like I'm looking at the schedule, probably about 25 or so points a game. And quite honestly, I think they're probably out of the hardest part of their schedule. Like there's probably a really good shot that they can run the table here. They've got Texas Tech at home, at Texas, at Baylor, and Iowa State at home. Is it crazy for me to think that they can go 4-0 in that game with everything that they've done and everything that they've showed us against teams like SMU, Oklahoma, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Kansas State? And I say SMU because they're always at least a tough, formidable opponent for you to be able to play every single year. I would have loved to have seen them come join the new Big 12. Which I guess there's always still a possibility that could happen. But no, TCU statistically is playing really well. Max Duggan at quarterback. I mean, you never want to see anybody get hurt, but Chandler Morris going down for them might have been the best thing for them because you're getting a guy in Max Duggan right now who has 2,200 yards on the season, 22 touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions. He's playing phenomenal. And then you've got a first-round wide receiver in Quentin Johnson, which that always helps you, right? And then you've got a running back that's almost at 1,000 yards and Kendre Miller at 851 yards for the season. Like, and not to mention their defense, pretty solid up and down the board. You don't have anybody on that defense that's blowing anybody out statistically, but if you look at it, they're very evened out and they're very on all the same level, which I think that helps when everybody's playing like around the same level. Like you don't have any like gaps at that point. And so I think TCU has a very good shot at running the table here, potentially sitting at 13-0, going to the college football playoffs. I think the committee is setting themselves up for failure, putting them below Alabama as an undefeated team. But I'll save that one for another day.
Yeah. Well, Drew, before I let you go here, here's one thing that this is where the committee completely lost me. Whenever they spoke on TCU, they specifically said, we want for a team to be balanced, to be playing offense and defense. And I was like, well, sure, cool. But the number one team in the nation right now that beat Alabama has no semblance of a defense and has an incredible offense, and we put them number one. So I get it. Tennessee has the wins.
They had one good game against Kentucky, you know.
Well, and you could make an argument that TCU has played probably the most balanced schedule out of all of the undefeated teams on in the rankings, and that they might have one of the tougher schedules because
I think Tennessee's probably giving them a run for their money.
Tennessee's giving them a run for their money, but I mean, look at it in 1, 2, 3, 4 straight weeks you played ranked opponents. And I know people are going to look at it and go, oh, well, Oklahoma's down this season. Well, yeah, but if Dylan Gabriel continues to stay in that game, that's a completely different game for TCU. So, and Oklahoma is going to be a tough opponent for anybody to go play. So we're really going to say that because Oklahoma has 3 losses this season that they weren't a formidable opponent for TCU. Come on. Like when I look at the schedule, I see a very tough schedule. Like I don't see an easy cakewalk schedule like what
here's
everybody's
what you
trying
got to
to make
remember, bro.
And to your
Tennessee
point,
got the
you said-
Pittsburgh ranked win, the Florida ranked win, the LSU ranked win, the Alabama ranked win.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
they've-
I
so
think to
4
your
and 4.
point, Ty, you were saying that is TCU being overlooked. I think a lot of people are overlooking just the quality of opponents in the Big 12.
True.
Because week after week, and I'm not saying they're better than the SEC, so slow down, people. Okay. I'm saying that there's quality teams that can go in and week out and beat each other here in this conference.
Yeah,
and we've seen it.
I could make the argument that the Big 12 right now is better than the Big 10 in terms of depth and what we're putting out from a competitive standpoint, because the Big 10 is so top heavy and the Big 12 is so fair across the board. All these teams are able to compete with each other, and you saw it out of conference play. The Big 12 pretty much beat almost everybody they played it out of conference play, outside of just a few losses, including our bottom feeders in Iowa State and West Virginia. They went and played very tough games or won those games out of conference. So you know what? I think they're trying to set TCU up as if they get one loss, the Big 12's out. No, like if the TCU's sitting at undefeated and you got a 1-loss USC or a 1-loss Alabama, you have to put TCU above both of those teams.
Well, and
there's
TCU,
no excuse for it.
Yeah, for TCU, like Ty was talking about, they could very easily run the table. And I think PG pointed that to that point because they have Tech this week. They at Texas, at Baylor, and then home to finish against Iowa State. So those are 4 games, and yes, they're going to be some tough games, but with what we've seen with that explosive offense, and you broke it down with the playmakers and everybody that they have, and Duggan he's a one-man wrecking crew. He's had some games where he's just hey, hold my beer, here you go, let me show you how to do this thing. And they could could they slip up and lose to a Texas or Baylor or whatever? But yeah, I think that goes to the strength of our conference and just how much quality there is, from top to bottom in the Big 12. So yeah,
this is why we need a 12-team playoff. And this is why the playoff has to be expanded, because what if TCU drops one game? So you're going to say that Alabama's better than them because now they're both even at that one loss? No, like I would want to see TCU be able to compete as a conference champion with all the other conference champions and have a run.
And you could even
TCU's played so well.
Yeah. Well,
it depends who they lose to.
Yep. And that's what I was going to say.
If they lose to a team that's not the number 1 team in the nation, PG, then yes, I think you had your opportunity. You blew it.
Yep. Well, if you're comparing
meritocracy,
TCU with a 1-loss Alabama and a TCU, well, look at the opponents and look at like TCU and their game against Texas and how well they will play against Texas if it comes to that, and how well Texas and played against Alabama. You can look at theirs. There's some comparisons. There's some things that you can look at from some teams that if you're at the end of the year comparing a 1-loss to an undefeated TCU or whatever the case is. But TCU, if they run the table, they can definitely make a case for being in the college football, and they should, because they're going undefeated in the Big 12 is no easy cakewalk.
But now here's one thing, and this is why I make the case for, and I know this is kind of going off on a tangent, but it's we're going to relate this back to TCU. This is why I think expanding the playoffs is so important, because for so many years I've talked to other people about this, but what if Texas gets good again and you have I'm going to say what if, because I thought this was the year they'd put it together. But, what if Texas and OU are good again and OU loses in the Red River rivalry, right? They have 1 loss, but they go beat Texas in the Big 12 championship. So now both have 1 loss with an expanded 12-team playoff. Then you could put OU and Texas in there. Let's say Bama loses.
You want to know why you don't do that?
As a 1-loss team, you get 2 1-loss SEC championship games in there. You could put Michigan and Ohio State in there. You could let everybody go in there and duke it out for best.
You want to know why we don't do that?
Hey, listen.
There's one thing that college football. No. Let me. I let you have your. I'm gonna tell you this. college football is different from every other sport. And the one reason it's different, the one reason we talk about the impassioned fan base, the tribalism, all relates back to the enhanced meritocracy that we see in college football. Now we're trying to strip back the one thing that makes college football unique and say, let's make it like all the other forms of football we don't like quite as much. I don't understand that. I'm not saying it's going to be bad, but the logic of let's take what we love so much and make it like the forms of football that we don't enjoy as much, that just doesn't really track to me. Now, here's one thing I do agree with. If TCU goes undefeated, they should be in. And someone, I think it was Sooner Cowboy, I do agree. I don't know how LSU is ranked at number 10. I think the committee must really love Ole Miss because that's the only argument I can give you. I don't know about LSU at 10 though. That was
they're trying to give Alabama a top 10 win. That's all they're trying to do.
Well, I mean, look, I just don't get it.
There's a few of those in the top 10. Now, for the most part, I agreed with the first rankings, but I didn't expect Georgia to be at 3. Obviously, it's going to take care of itself this week. I thought they would be at 2, and then Clemson jumping Michigan. I didn't expect that one either, but yeah, and certainly LSU being a top 10 team, definitely did not see that one. And then Texas at top 25 team.
Yeah, well, these rankings were trash. I'll tell you that because one, I think Ohio State's the best, most complete team in the country. They should have been top dog. I mean, Tennessee's really good. Don't get me wrong. I think Tennessee could go for that number 1 spot too, but I just like Ohio State. The whole Clemson argument, I get where people are like, how is Clemson? But I mean, if you look at Clemson's schedule, I mean, it's not awful. I think people are discounting the.
I think you have a better
how good Syracuse and Wake Forest are. Because
well, here's what I'll say, PG. I think you got a better chance convincing me that TCU's got a better strength of schedule than Clemson than they do Tennessee.
Well,
Clemson's just getting recency
come
bias.
down to that at the end of the year.
Clemson's just getting recency bias.
Have a very good chance at winning out, and you could see both of those teams being the discussion for the 4th spot. So that could very easily happen.
Listen, if we have an undefeated SEC champion, an undefeated Big Ten champion, an undefeated ACC champion, and an undefeated Big 12 champion, I don't want to hear any talks about 2 SEC teams getting in this year. I want to see all the undefeateds get in. I don't want the one loss Alabama or Georgia to get into this thing if, that's what it comes down to.
Well, winning your conference should matter.
Winning your games should matter.
There's 3 or 4 teams in the SEC that we'll look at our strength of schedule, but you didn't win your conference. And I'm sorry that you have to play, such and such and this and that, but that's your conference. But these other teams earn the right to try to go play for a national championship by what they have done. They can't help their schedule. They can't help that they're not in the SEC. So, it's one of those things where I always, when they talk about a 2-team SEC, it's just compelling TV, I guess, and for ratings.
Yeah,
I think the way I look at it, I want the best teams in. That's the way I've always looked at it. Is I want the best 4 teams in, and this year
I don't never see been that way.
Well, when hasn't it? Who would you argue should have gotten in last year?
I will always bring up this argument. In 2020, OU loses 2 games at the beginning of the season without Ramondre Stevenson. I think it was Ronnie Perkins that we were without. And there was somebody else that we were without. And then we come back, we go on this really hot streak, we get everybody back healthy, and OU looks like one of the best teams in the country to go win the national championship. Yet, because
I got a question for you, PG. I got a question for you, PG. What were y'all just talking about here earlier that OU didn't play?
Didn't play.
Yeah, you said there's a whole reason why y'all aren't surprised defensive linemen aren't coming there because there's a whole thing OU didn't play.
Oh, yeah, defense.
Defense? Okay, so you're going to stop Devontae Smith? No. Devontae Smith would have hung 300 on y'all. Like, let's just be honest, right? He hung 210 against Ohio State in a half.
And it was like the 2019, we did not belong in that game against LSU.
Yes, but down the stretch after Texas
PG,
that year,
if you're telling me y'all were a team, you just said y'all would compete for a national championship. I don't think y'all would have lasted a half against Alabama.
See,
your defense wouldn't stop anything.
I'm
But
not sure about that because
what
when I
what
go
showed
look
you?
at that 2020 year, after Texas, the most points you gave up in a game was 28 to Texas Tech to an air raid offense, right? Other than that, you pretty well held everybody at bay. You held
Damn,
TCU
there's
to
a world of
14.
difference between that Texas Tech offense and that Alabama offense.
I'm
Devontae
just
Smith won a
saying.
Heisman.
I'm just saying,
Who's
that
going to cover
Oklahoma
Devontae
Center's
Smith?
defense got better, especially when Ronnie Perkins and them came back in.
Sure, but who's going to cover Devontae Smith?
I believe, didn't we have Trey Norwood that year?
Yeah, that would have been a tough battle.
And who's
I
going
mean, it would have
to
been a
account
tough
for
battle,
Najee?
and it might have been a shootout. But listen, there was no doubt in my mind that Oklahoma team could have went and competed with anybody at the highest level that year.
And that's
And
fair,
that
but I
if you were
disagree.
talking about the 4 best teams in the country, at the end of the season, Oklahoma looked like one of the 4 best teams in the country. But that's why I think expanding the playoffs is so important, because you can have a team that had injuries at the beginning of the season. They can drop 1 or 2 games because they had significant injuries, and then at the end of the season look like a team that could go compete. What if Bryce Young is out for 2 or 3 games at the beginning of the season and Alabama drops those 2 or 3 games, right?
Then we don't
Like,
deserve to be in the playoffs.
For me, that's a lot of what ifs in that
Then
scenario.
we don't deserve. I can answer it. We don't deserve to be in the playoffs because football is a physical game. Injuries are a part of football. It sucks. It happens. But if every other team has to deal with it, so do we. So if we drop those 2 games, damn it, you're at Alabama. It's not just Bryce. This isn't Bryce Young University. Now I get it. I love Bryce Young, but man, I hear you. But I would be of the same mindset, man. I wouldn't think that we deserve to be in.
I mean, and that's why I think we should expand it, because I just think that there's too many teams that end up in those positions that should have a chance.
I like the expansion talk, but I don't like it at 12 teams. I think that's a little much right now. I think 6 or 8 teams, I think is a reasonable, expansion. But I mean, that's maybe for another discussion.
That it's such a fun discussion to have, right?
It
because
is.
there's so many points, counterpoints,
points for every single scenario and stuff like that. But for me, I don't know that 22. I'm a diehard, trust me, but I don't know if we could. I don't know if that team could have hung with Alabama that year. And it's just, I mean, it would have been a fun thing to see. Maybe not so fun. Who knows? And you never know. But
and I'm of the mindset that year was like the previous year, where it was like 2019 LSU. That was destiny to run through everybody on the route to that's how I feel about Alabama. And this is an interesting question, Ohio. Who wins, 2019 or 2020 Alabama? I think you can argue either way. Now, me being an Alabama fan, of course, I'm going to give you why I think Alabama wins first. First and foremost, I think if we look at that 2019 LSU-Alabama game, Alabama only lost 5 points after having basically a non-existent first half performance. We also look back to that 2019 game. Jerry Jeudy dropped 2 passes in the end zone that would have given Alabama 14 points. Plus, the SEC had that controversial ruling where the tight end for LSU, Moss, stepped out of bounds, then came back in, had the touchdown. So that was a wild game anyways. So I think Alabama had all the capabilities to hang with LSU. That 2020 Alabama offense was just insane. On the flip side, though, I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's no way LSU couldn't win and beat Alabama. Let's look at the matchups for LSU. You had Moss, the tight end. You had Joe Burrow. You had Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You had Justin Jefferson. You had all those. Man, there is an argument. There is an argument for either one of those teams to win that game. That's how good it is.
I'll do you one better. I could put out a team that could beat both of those teams.
Who?
The 2001 Miami Hurricanes.
Oh, okay. Well, see, look, it's very hard for me to argue against that because that whole team is an NFL team, right? Like
17 first-round picks off of that team was insane.
Shoot, are we just talking about the best team in college football? Then is that the conversation we're going to?
I don't know. That was just some
no. We got derailed. But we have had some SEC talk. We need to go over to the SEC. We got some Georgia fans in here. For the Georgia fans, thank you for joining us. I can't wait to see y'all's game against Tennessee.
That's going to be a great one.
We're going to talk about that. But first, guys, we got to talk about Texas A&M. All right, we got to talk about Texas A&M. They can't catch a break. Now, I said this last week, and I got a little bit of pushback. I said, I feel for Jimbo Fisher. Now, let me explain before I get the oohs and ahs, right? When I say I feel for Jimbo Fisher, I mean they're backed against a wall right? They are backed against a wall. And because of injuries, because of now sickness, they're having a hard time responding. I feel for any coach that's being plagued by the injury bug and the sickness bug, because more than I feel for the coach, I feel for the team. Guys, reports out of Texas A&M this week that they're dealing with flu issues, which, by the way, guys, be safe. Drink your emergency because the flu is going around. My fiance is a teacher. She had it. It is going around.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they got it. That is not all what you want to see if you're Texas A&M, because what we talked about with OU, you want to recapture momentum. If you think OU wants to recapture momentum, guys, you think OU wants to recapture momentum. How do you think Texas Tech and Jimbo Fisher feel?
Yeah, they're chomping.
Desperate. Talk to me, PG. I want to hear from you because, geez, this it seems like when it rains, it pours for Texas A&M.
Yeah, well, I mean, good news for the Texas A&M Aggies and all Aggie fans out there. I was wrong about you guys only getting 4 wins this season. Y'all are going to get 5 because Auburn fired their head coach. That game now looks a little bit like that UMass game on the road. So, look, you're going to get 5 wins this season. That's going to be a little bit better for you. I don't think, it sucks that they're getting plagued by injuries, getting plagued by the sickness, whatever it is. I mean, it sucks. Nobody wants to see it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, they were still going to go out here and lose these games because Jimbo Fisher's trash and can't call the offensive plays correctly. He can't hand it over to somebody else that's at least half as or more competent than him. At least they were able to finally get Connor Weigman out there who could actually do something for A&M. But I mean, shoot, leave it up to Jimbo to mess that one up. It doesn't matter. A&M's still going to have a huge exodus in the transfer portal this year. I still expect to see Evan Stewart end up at Ohio State, Overton to end up at OU, Dindy to end out at USC. I mean, they're gonna have.
That's the last thing Ohio State needs.
Well, here's another one. Don't forget, Jamar Cain at LSU could have something to say about Dindy because he was the one that recruited Dindy to OU. So
good point.
LSU might be in the running for Dindy if he chooses the transfer portal. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, Dindy's going to the portal, and their class is going to fall apart. And you know what? It's going to come down to they're going to have to find money to get rid of Jimbo because Jimbo is the X factor. He's the problem out there. And gosh, Sooners Cowboys said it. If they lose to UMass, do you have to fire Jimbo at that point? Like,
I'm fairly certain in the contract, losing to UMass is something that can get you fired with cause. Don't quote me on that, but I'm fairly certain.
Yeah, listen. It sucks, but listen. I mean, there's no hope for A&M at this point. And let's stop acting like they were going to do something without the injury bug. The only thing that Texas A&M has had going for them all season is that their defense has at least played somewhat okay. Like their defense at least has looked good, right? And I say it looks good because they're putting a bunch of freshmen out there, and they're at least not letting the opponents just run all over them. That's what I mean by that. Because they're still giving up about 20 or so points a game. But I guess in today's college football game, that's good. But it doesn't matter. But hey, you get one more win with Auburn.
Yeah, and one step closer to being bowl eligible. So, but no, for me, here's a question that I would pose to everybody: is, Jimbo Fisher is supposed to be this offensive guru and this quarterback guy and everything like that. Other than Jameis Winston, what other quarterback has he had in the last 10 years? Or in the last 15 years, really. And his offense, I don't know whether it's stubbornness or whether it's just my way or the highway or whatever it is, but he refuses to, I guess refuse is the word, just to not adapt and not bring somebody else in. Maybe nobody wants to work with him. I don't know. Maybe that's another question, but I can't figure out what everybody, and especially A&M fans and even people out there are so enamored with Jimbo being this quote, great football coach. Yeah, he's a good coach, everything like that. But look at his track record, and other than his time at LSU, whether he was under Nick Saban, and then he goes and catches lightning in a bottle at Florida State when he had those really good recruits and guys that was able just to be able to run his offense. what has he really done over the last, several years as a head coach?
He's not really that good of a coach, though. Like, I
Yeah.
can make the argument I could have went out there and won a national championship with Jameis
PG, I love
Winston.
you, but no, you couldn't have.
Okay, maybe not that. Like, I might be a little too, but I'm just saying, like, he's not that good of a coach, and he's trying to be Nick Saban, and he can't be Nick Saban
No.
because he doesn't
That's
have
gonna
the
get you
success. But
fired.
he tries to be a hard ass, just like Nick Saban is, but he doesn't have that kind of success.
Yeah. And he's got this old school type of mindset where he's just, hey, if I can just bag on the young cats and everything, and oh, look at Lane Kiffin, look what he's doing, he's a joke and all this other stuff. Well, I mean, your act that you're putting out is quite a joke as well. And so it's funny to me how he's got basically the people at A&M fooled with and how they're paying him that much money is unbelievable to me. Like 86 point something $1 million buyout he has, or whatever it is. It's just, I don't know where to begin to even ask questions to the A&M people down there. It's like, what are you guys doing? Like,
It's robbery. He
Yeah.
robbed them.
This
he's a
is
good
the part.
salesman, we'll say that.
Very good. This is the part, right, where I think the tune changes with Jimbo Fisher. If Jimbo Fisher hadn't had that contract extension, I think I'd be willing to grant more leniency. I think I'd be willing to try and delve into my bag of tricks to make an argument to try and explain some of what we've seen at Texas A&M, right? And PG, to be fair, I mean, you can vouch for me here to the people. I will do that. Like, if I feel like there is some semblance of a logical argument that can justify something, I'm going to try and present it to you. Because we can talk about, oh, well, this team is bad. I want to try and give you all the reasons I think they're bad. And sometimes that might come off as an excuse, but really that's just me trying to find the answers so we can discuss from there. Whenever you get that contract extension, that goes out the window, guys. Yeah. And it fair or not fair, when you sign that dotted line, if you're getting paid like Nick Saban, you can't have the opposite of Nick Saban results. I'll tell you that much. I'm not saying you got to win like Nick Saban, but damn, you cannot lose like you're everybody but Nick Saban, right? I mean, it's just
at least put out a 10-win season.
Well, and I think complacency is not in Nick Saban's repertoire.
No,
it is not. He's not going to say, oh, well, I'm worth it. Yeah, he's going to prove that he's worth this money. And the way I think, and where his coaching tree and where he came from and how he learned how to coach was arguably from one of the greatest, and Bill Belichick and some other guys that he's been under. It's just been unreal. Jimbo learned from basically Nick Saban. And so, like PG's point was, he's trying to be like Nick Saban and nobody else really can.
And here's where I'm going to piggyback. So 2 things, Ohio. First and foremost, I'm just going to ignore the Stag Jr. comment, right? You and I, we've gotten this great relationship going now. I will not have the emergency slander, right? You and my fiance, both, every opportunity you get, slander emergency to me, and I will not take it. I will not take it. I have enough of it in my own household. But I love the point you're making here, because I want to take this one step further, right? I want to take this logical line right here and apply the next step. Who did Jimbo Fisher replace, guys? Kevin Sumlin, right? So I think if we're talking about what has been done better under Jimbo Fisher than Kevin Sumlin, I'll give you recruiting. I don't think Kevin Sumlin was a bad recruiter, but Jimbo, like, if there's one thing we can say about Jimbo and A&M, they can recruit. They
Absolutely.
recruit well.
Yep.
So why is it, guys, that Jimbo Fisher has less ranked wins, less road ranked wins, more group of 5 losses than Kevin Sumlin had, and less wins overall, while he's had better talent? And you signed him to a contract extension, which begs me this question, and maybe one of you, maybe someone here in the chat can help me. What is the expectation at Texas A&M? You had a barely winning season last year, and you gave your coach $100 million raise. The coach hasn't won a playoff game. The coach hasn't been in the playoffs. What is the standard of acceptability at Texas A&M? Because until that question is answered, mediocrity will ensue. Because now you have said this is the standard. That's my big issue. I'm going to digress off of that because I will keep going and keep
No,
going.
maybe you brought up a great point. Maybe that is their standard. Maybe they just want to make money. Maybe it's the Jerry Jones formula. Hey, maybe we want to put a good product out there, make some money, make a few ripples, things like that. But when it comes to really getting down and winning, maybe that's just not our thing. And we'll pretend like we're going to do some things. We're going to recruit well. We're going to do that. But I think where he lacks and where some of his staff has lacked over, especially the last 5 or 6 years, is think about it when you're recruiting these guys. What do you have to do when you get them to campus? You have to develop them. Some of them have been developed. Some of them have not. And very few of them. And why can't you get a quarterback? If you're this great quarterback coach, why can't you get a quarterback that can run your offense?
Hopefully Weigman is it for them. I'm genuinely hoping for all A&M fans.
Hey, I will give him credit. Hey, that kid played a hell of a game. And he gave him an opportunity to win that game. He was basically had a concussion and came back in the game and scored a touchdown. No fault for Weigman, but where's everybody else that wants to win? Where is that like you said, answer the question is, what is your identity? What do you want to be as a program?
I don't know the answer to that for A&M because their actions have confused me. Their actions do not say the standard is Georgia. The standard is Ohio State. I don't see that. I don't see that. Now, guys, yeah. Matt, I think you're 100% right.
Yep.
There's a word that we haven't said.
Culture.
Culture.
Yeah, the culture at Texas A&M, here's what I think it is, right? Texas A&M has thought of this process of, we're just going to go, I'm going to say buy because that's what's going on. We're going to go buy all these recruits because it's legal now and we can do it without getting in trouble. So we're going to go buy all these recruits and try to put together the best team together. We're going to put this best team together and we're going to go out there and win with talent. But this is what I've tried to explain to everybody about the Todd Bates thing. 5 stars don't always translate to performance on the field.
Yep.
Because what has Venables and Bates done really well? They can turn 3-star guys that aren't even ranked in the composite, to be NFL draft talent, right? Sometimes when you have a 3 or 4-star guy and they're being underlooked by everybody else, they have motivation and they have all the reason to come in and be teachable, right?
Perfect example to Clemson was a guy named Isaiah Simmons coming out of the Kansas City area. Arkansas wanted him to walk on. And Clemson found him because of their roots, because of Venables' roots in that area, said, hey, come and play at Clemson. We'll turn you into something special. And they did. That's a case in point. But I always look at the way that Isaiah Simmons and how his track record and how he progressed when he got to Clemson. Nobody really, was like, oh, really highly on this kid. This kid's going to, but junior, senior year dominated,
Yeah.
And
I love the deal
right
is
here.
5-star guys, they don't always, like I said, they don't always translate. And sometimes the 5-star guys, they have it in their head. I'm going to go to the league. They have all this, thing in their head, all the clout. And then they come to campus, a place like Texas A&M, a lot to do. They get into trouble. It just doesn't work out. So, yeah.
Well, I think David, that's a great point.
Yeah, I love this, David. I love this. And I think it's so accurate, right? I think it, and look, and it's not just fan bases, David. And I hate to single the kid out, but like, it doesn't help when you win a game against Georgia. Now, granted, David, I think everybody in the nation will give you that one. That was a great performance against the Georgia Bulldogs. Nobody had y'all winning that game, and you took it to them. You were the more physical team. You were the better team for if I remember correctly, every single quarter of that football game. But then you have Ellinger saying, we're back. Now, huge win. Emotions are high, but I think that's the exact thing you're speaking to right now. Now, the one reason I do like Sark is they're trying to temper expectations, right? Like, there's a lot I think Sark needs to work through, but there are certain things I see that I do like. It's going to be interesting to see. Dawn, I think you're right. Texas is like, OU fans should expect nothing but the best. And look, Two great programs, historically speaking, in college football. So expectations should be high, deservedly so. Now, guys, I want to move us to two more games because we can talk about some of these issues for hours, right? Alabama LSU. Now, Hummus, I don't know if you're still in here. Hope you are, but I saw a comment earlier and you said of the remaining games, you think Alabama has a chance that they could drop one or two. I'm assuming when you're saying that you're probably pointing to Ole Miss and LSU. Here's where I'm going to meet you, man. If Alabama doesn't get out of their own way, yeah, I mean they are a threat to lose a game. If Alabama can play Alabama football, I like them against any team in the country. They lost to Tennessee by a few points after having committed 17 penalties. That's dumb. That's dumb. Like whenever we realized how undisciplined this team is, like whenever we peel back one of the next two, not two. Okay, my bad. That's my fault. I couldn't remember whether it was one of or not two, but yeah, I assume of those one, you're assuming either LSU or Ole Miss, which I would completely grant you is logical. I think that's very logical. But if Bama starts playing Bama football, I think they can go toe-to-toe with anybody in the nation, right? I'm not saying beat because the games have to be played, but I think whenever you lose by 3 to Tennessee with 17 penalties, that's indicative you're a fantastic football team, but goodness gracious, you need some help.
Yeah.
They take on LSU this weekend. Now, guys, LSU is a team that I agree with y'all. I think number 10 is very generous. Very, very generous. I do think a lot of people have slept on LSU to a degree. Not that they're a power team, but they're a team that has been getting better every single week. I'm going to be very honest, guys. I don't mean to parrot what Josh Pate says. I don't think this is a good matchup for LSU. And there are a few reasons why. First and foremost, when you look at LSU, I don't think they have the ability to go tit for tat with Alabama's offense if Alabama's offense is able to get in rhythm. Daniels there, I like him, but if Alabama can keep him in the pocket, I think they're going to make his day a lot harder. Now, on the flip side, the Alabama offensive stats are a little bit skewed, but remember, the Alabama stats look like that with Bryce Young being out a game, much the same for Oklahoma's stats, right? It's hard to tell just the quality of that offense when you have a game and a half sample size, your starting quarterback wasn't playing, right? That's going to have an effect.
Yeah.
I don't think that LSU is a good matchup for Alabama. I think Alabama has a lot of ways to be able to hurt LSU, and I think LSU is a team that they've been improving. The injuries they had along the defensive line, I think, is going to be something that rears their head. Now, I do like some of the players they have on that defensive line. Wingo, Ojulari, they have got some dudes, man. And then Kayshon Boutte is as big of a problem as there is in college football. But whenever I look at LSU, personally, guys, it all just revolves around that offense. And I don't think they have the offensive capabilities to score a ton of points. I just don't see that from this LSU offense. Chat, I want to hear fair or unfair, and PG, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I actually have LSU beating Alabama in this game, and that's just because,
Right.
listen, Bill O'Brien, he's going to be Bill O'Brien, and he's going to cost Alabama another game here. And this might be the game where Nick Saban gets tired of it and fires Bill O'Brien, which I know you'd be really happy about, Ty, to finally get him out of there. So maybe you want Alabama to drop this game.
No.
But I'm really impressed with LSU's defense, and in terms, one of the true freshmen they have on that team, Harold Perkins. He's the linebacker. He's a true freshman. He was a 5-star out of the recent class. He's making a name for himself. I think he's got, looking at 36 tackles this year, 2.5 sacks. He's definitely going to be a guy that Bryce Young and the offensive line for Alabama is going to have to be able to keep an eye on. But listen, one of the reasons why I really like this LSU team, Brian Kelly has got, if I remember correctly, beat out twice in whether it's the BCS or the college football playoffs to Alabama. He went to LSU and said, I want Nick Saban. He wants Nick Saban every single year. He wants to have an opportunity to be able to beat the guy that has cost him from winning a national championship. And he has the opportunity to do that. And he's at a school where I think he could potentially get better talent, because at Notre Dame, with their academic stuff, maybe it's a little bit harder to be able to go out there and get those guys. I think Jaden Daniels is improving as a quarterback. He's throwing for almost 70% of his passes. Now, the only thing that concerns me about their offense is Jaden Daniels is not only having to do it through the air, he's also having to do it for you on the ground, right? He's rushed for 113 times for 524 yards. The next closest running back on the team is Josh Williams for 305. So if your running backs play well in this game, and Jaden Daniels doesn't have to go out there and take as many hits from the Alabama defense, I think you're starting to look at it and go, well, LSU has a really good shot. I think, like you said, they have a lot of good weapons on the defensive side. And if Alabama calls the games like they have been all season, they could be in trouble there. Now, if Jamar Gibbs potentially goes out there and just has himself a day, then maybe we're looking at something completely different. But I think LSU wins this one by 3, maybe a touchdown. But I think it's going to be more likely another field goal game for Alabama.
What you thinking, Drew?
This one, it's going to be an interesting one. It's a night game. It's down at Death Valley. We all know about LSU's crowd and how hostile they can get and everything like that. Here's an X factor in the game for me. Can LSU get pressure on Bryce Young? Can they affect him? Can they get him off his spots? Can they create some turnovers? Can that defensive line get after the pass rusher? Can they allow that secondary to play in coverage? That's going to be the battle that I'm going to be watching in the trenches. And it seems like every week in the SEC, that's what you talk about is between the between in the box, with the D line, O line, whatever the case is, linebacker, stuff like that. But is LSU going to be able to score against that defense? And can they, in turn, can their offensive line hold up against a really good defensive line? One of probably the best defensive lines in the country with Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, some of those guys who can really get after the pass rusher when they have the ability. And can Alabama play a clean football game for the first time this year? I think they went a long way in the Mississippi State game. They got back on track a little bit, but is that crowd going to be able to affect them? Cause some penalties, cause some uncharacteristic things that we've seen out of Alabama this year. I think Alabama is poised to play one of their best games of the year. I think they've heard all the negativity. I think they've heard, we're not the same Alabama team, or our coach is getting some flack and whatever the case is. I really feel like Alabama has the opportunity to go in here and put the hammer down on LSU, and I feel like they can. And I think they can go in and dominate this game. I think LSU. I think the moment is going to be too big for them, and I like Alabama by a couple touchdowns in this game.
I would agree with you there if it wasn't for the fact that this game is being played in Tiger Stadium. The fact that it's going to be in Death Valley at night, it's going to be.
But I think that Alabama has played in some of these big games, and LSU, some of those guys have not yet.
Yeah, and we've got some requests for Georgia topics. We're gonna get to Georgia right after this. I want to briefly put this. Good comments. Hummus says LSU actually hasn't beat Alabama at home in like a decade. 2019 was in Tuscaloosa. And that's true. Actually, I think if I'm not mistaken, there were 2 or 3 years in a row where Bama held, not years in a row, obviously, 2 sequences of Bama playing in Tiger Stadium in a row where they held them scoreless in their own stadium. Whenever I look at the way the schematics come together, PG, normally I would have less disagreement with you because a lot of what you're saying is rooted in logic, but I just think this LSU team schematically, it's just not a great matchup. But you want to know, in fairness, I think a lot of people probably said that about LSU taking on Ole Miss, and look what happened there. But guys, we have got a lot of talk about Ohio State. We've got a lot of talk about Georgia, and we got to talk about the big game this week, the game of the week in college football this week, the game we're going to end the live on, Georgia, Tennessee. Now, Tribe asks a great question, and Tribe, I'm going to put a pin in this for a little bit. Can the Buckeyes compete with the Bulldogs? Can the Buckeyes compete? Yes, they can compete. Can they beat Georgia? I don't know. I don't know just yet. Let me watch them play Michigan so I can get a real good understanding of who Ohio State is. What I do know about Ohio State right now, they're easily one of the best teams in college football, but that Michigan game is going to be very telling. Now,
Huge.
don't get me wrong. I want to see how Georgia reacts to Tennessee this weekend as well. So this is not a situation where I'm sitting here asking only for Ohio State to show me something. I want to see what Georgia looks like when they take on a Tennessee this weekend as well. So next week, I think on Monday, Tribe, if you're able, Monday 5:30, we do the live stream reacting to the week. Ask me that same question. Then I'll have a little bit more to go off of. But can they compete? Yes. Guys, game of the week this week. I don't think there's any question. Tennessee, Georgia, number 1 versus number 3. I know the Georgia fans in the chat have to feel like at some level they got slighted a little bit. That at some level they haven't done anything to lose the number 1 ranking. And hey, I hear you. At the same time, I think it's fair that Tennessee has done a lot to earn the number 1 ranking. But at the end of the day, what we do know is that this game is going to decide a lot for the SEC and the college football playoffs. Guys, when I look at this game, I'm going to give my take. I think Tennessee is going to make this a lot tougher on Georgia than Georgia fans and a lot of people are thinking. When you look at the FPI for this game, it is a massive favorite for the Georgia Bulldogs. However, this is where I have some concern for Tennessee. I think Georgia has one of the most unstoppable rooms in college football. Georgia fans, I apologize for you hearing me say this again. Y'all's tight end room gives me headaches to think about because they're mismatches. They're too big, too fast, too physical to put on linebackers, and they're too physical to put on safeties. So you don't know what to do with them. Tennessee's defense has been a liability at portions this year. The thing that scares me, guys, when I think about this game is if Georgia is able to get that quick 3 and out, and Tennessee is in that loop of 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and we look and all of a sudden there's 4 minutes left in the first half and Georgia's up 13-0 and they're just suffocating the Volunteers. That is what I worry about for Tennessee. Preston, I want to hear from you, man. I think this is going to be a better game than people think, but I think if you had to ask me right now, I'd pick the Georgia Bulldogs in this game.
Yeah, so I think for me, it really just depends on one of two things. What happens, right? If this game is a shootout, Tennessee comes out on the advantage, right? I just think Tennessee has more firepower, and I just think they're more built like an Oklahoma or an LSU team in the past where you're not going to be able to outscore Tennessee if you go into a shootout. Now, if it comes down to a defensive battle, Tennessee's going to get potentially blown out in this game because Georgia has the potential to go out there and stop some of these wide receivers and to be able to cause a lot of problems for Hendon Hooker. Now, do I think that that's going to happen? No, I think Hendon Hooker is not going to have a great game, but I think he's going to be able to have a good enough game to be able to go out there and beat Georgia. My question is can Tennessee go out there and stop Brock Bowers? Right. If they can go out there and on the defensive side of the ball, make it a focal point to make Brock Bowers not beat you, they're putting themselves in a prime position to go out there and beat Georgia, because now you're telling Georgia, you have to go out there and find a different weapon. We're not just going to be able to let Brock Bowers go over there and catch the ball all over us. And yeah, I know they got Darnell Washington, that McConkey kid. I think I said his last name right.
McConkey, the wide receiver. Then they got Delp, the other tight. They've got so much tight end talent.
They've got so much, but I mean, again, you stop Brock Bowers and you're putting
I don't know,
yourself
man. Darnell Washington just didn't he hurdle someone a few weeks ago at 6'7"?
Yeah, I think
it looks like LeBron James playing football. Like it's just,
dude, you line him up on goal line and it's just automatic. That's a mismatch.
I think people are underestimating, though, what Tennessee has on defense, because they do have a guy in Trayvon Flowers in the backfield that, listen, he can play ball out there, okay? Like, don't be sleeping on him or Christian Charles. So I do think in the passing game, Tennessee can potentially keep Georgia maybe at bay. I'm more curious to see what happens in the running game for Georgia. Like, is this the game that we see Georgia go out there and just run for 300 or 400 yards because Tennessee's potentially stopping their passing game? Does Georgia have a running game that is as elite as as elite as we have seen in the past. I don't know. I'm curious to see that this week. But again, it comes down to one of two ways, right? If it goes into a shootout, it's Tennessee. If it comes down to more of like a defensive battle, Georgia's going to come out victorious in this one. It's in Athens too, and it sucks this game's at 2:30. I wish this game was the night game and Alabama and LSU was at 2:30 because I'm going to be in Norman and I'm going to have to be watching this game on my phone while trying to watch the OU game. So,
yeah, same here. Same here. For me, two things. Number one, Tennessee, all their big wins have been where this year?
At home.
At home. So they haven't played a big road game yet. This is going to be their test, obviously. And can they pass it? Are they ready to step up and win a big game? We've seen them win a big game at home against Alabama, home against Kentucky, if you call that a big home win. Maybe Kentucky's a little overrated, but that's another discussion. But can Tennessee come in and run the football? Can they establish the line of scrimmage? It's going to go a long way. We all know they can throw it around the field, but can they have a balanced attack against Georgia? If they can do that, like PG said, they can win a shootout. They'll be able to keep Georgia off balance, be able to keep their offense and those tight ends and everybody on the sideline. And number two, are they going to be able to stop the running game? Because in the past, Georgia has been able to have really good running backs and a really good offensive line. And I think Georgia is going to come in there and try to set the tone at home and say, hey, we're going to run this thing down your throat, control the clock, and then on the flip side, try to keep your offense and Hendon Hooker on the sideline. And so those are two things, is which team is going to be able to run the football, and can Tennessee withstand the early hype and the crowd and everything, not having played a tough road game yet this year. And so those are the two things that I'm really looking forward to. Like PG said, LSU was on the road. Yeah, okay. But I'm talking about a big quality top 3, top 5 team. And LSU is not that team right now for me. So that's a good point. But I don't think LSU is in the same ballpark right now with Alabama and Georgia and even Tennessee. I think they're just on the outside there. But those are going to be the X factors for me. Like PG said, I'm going to be at the game, OU Baylor, trying to keep this one, on my phone, something like that. But who knows? Maybe we'll blow Baylor out and we can go out and tailgate and watch the Tennessee Georgia game. So that'd be my hope. So
absolutely not. I'll be in that stadium until the last play.
Yeah, I'll probably be there too. But yeah, those are my points and my takes for what I'm looking at in that game.
Yeah, I'll be in their last play for this reason. I've been saying it all week. I'm going to say it again. Brent Venables, call a timeout with 1 second left to kick a field goal, because after last season, listen, I've got the pettiness on high right now.
He's going to be there. Yeah, so.
Well, Michael, I don't think anybody is saying that Tennessee isn't a good team or they haven't played good teams, but I think there is a question, right, as to how much emphasis do you place on LSU? For instance, LSU comes in at number 10. I wouldn't put them at number 10. And we just had a whole segment saying LSU should be nowhere near number 10. So I do think that that's a good road win, but is that the level of a road win that a Georgia would be? Absolutely not. Is that the level of difficulty that you're going to see in Athens this weekend? Absolutely not. So pretending that those are analogous examples, they're further from. They couldn't be closer. Now, that doesn't mean that Tennessee is devout of talent or that they have zero chance, but pretending like LSU is the same as Athens this year couldn't be further from the truth, in my opinion. And, hey, I do like Tennessee a lot. I think they're going to, like I said, surprise
people. We just haven't seen them play a tough game on the road yet. A really, really tough game.
Yeah, and David says that Hendon Hooker's a great quarterback. He is just lights out right now. I think one thing that helps both teams, right? I've heard this is a total positive for Georgia. When people say, well, Georgia got to watch what Tennessee was going to do against Alabama. And because the defenses are so similar, that's a net positive for Georgia. Yes, but because the defenses are so similar, isn't it also a net positive for Tennessee that they have the conversation that they can go out there and go ball, right? Because they just hung it on Bama. So that's a two-way street, in my opinion. I think this game is going to be fantastic. Robert, I have no idea who you're talking to. Mark says, was Bama playing Bama football when they almost lost to Texas and when they came No, Mark, because they had 15 plus penalties in both of those games, which was not indicative of Alabama football. I think even
well,
very,
and they had
very
an offensive
uncharacteristic
coordinator
of an
who's
Alabama
just
team. When in the last however many centuries have you seen Alabama under Nick Saban commit that many penalties? Never.
now Savage, before that Tennessee game, I actually think Bama's defense was rated better than Georgia's. Now, don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on that. But I think they were. Could be wrong.
Scoring defense, no. Georgia's had one of the top 5 scoring defenses all year long.
I think they're allowing just over 10 a game right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Scoring defense, because I knew in certain categories, but like I said, that could be completely wrong. I do know
Tennessee
Georgia
also has the top ranked offense in the country right now. So
Yeah,
what's going to
true.
give? That's the thing in that game. And for me, it's I want to see what Tennessee can do in a really, really hostile environment.
Dang Trojan says excuses. We're talking about this season, not the ghost of Bama's past. Well, Trojan, when the question is asked, is this Alabama football? You aren't talking about this season. You're talking about the standard of expectations that have been laid forth by what has already been done. So inevitably, by the question being asked, you're not talking about this season. And so it's not an excuse, right? Guys, y'all got to remember.
Wait, hold on. Is that a USC fan?
Y'all got to remember, I debated at high school and college. So
PG.
I'm down for debates.
No, I'm just saying. What's a USC fan out here talking to an Alabama fan like that?
Dang Trojan, are you a USC fan? We want to know.
USC's a great team. I got nothing against USC.
No knock on them.
Nothing against USC.
No,
I'm excited for where y'all are going.
I have USC in that Texas category where they, the inkling of success. They think they're back, and I just think back to that opening season game where they just got completely manhandled by Alabama.
He says, I'm here for it. Well, I hope you are, man. I hope, because you can ask PG. I like to debate, and I'm good at it.
Oh, yeah.
That's one thing. Now Hummus and Savage, y'all pointed something out that I don't think a lot of people have noticed, right? First, Savage. Georgia also has a top 10 offense. They really do. I really didn't know how efficient Georgia's offense was until I really started, one, going through the film, two, going through the numbers. Very, very impressed. Trojan says, let me hop on chat. You are on chat right now, Trojan. You can chat with us right here. So yeah, I do think Georgia does have a good offense. And Hummus asks, do you think the turnover on the coaching staff and or the semi-reliance on the portal is causing a lack of cohesion for Alabama this season? I think more. So here's the interesting thing, Hummus, because I think one thing we've come to expect is for Alabama to be the exception as opposed to the rule for so long that the one time they're the rule as opposed to the exception, everything is doom and gloom, right? And we're saying, oh, well, now they can't develop. They just sent back. I mean, what have they done the past 3 years in the first round? So you're right. This year is not like a normal Alabama team where we're pointing out different inadequacies that they have. But I think that's more a system of what they've done in terms of developing more so than a reliance on the portal, right? I think whenever you send as many players to the NFL as they do, after a while, it's going to, like, I said this all the time. They're the only team in college football history that's ever sent 2 wide receivers to the first round of the NFL draft in back-to-back drafts. And had John Mechie not gotten hurt, they'd have been the only institution ever to send 3 years in a row 2 wide receivers first year in the NFL draft. PG,
yeah. Hey, can we talk about Weston's comment about Georgia hasn't played anybody besides Oregon? Because honestly, I went back and looked at their schedule, and they really haven't. And they're not going to really play anybody outside of Oregon and Tennessee. So that's actually a pretty good point. This is probably a really good
Those
test
are 2 top 10. Those are 2 good teams, though. True.
Yeah,
I hear you. This is a good test for Jordan.
That is a valid point. Something that you definitely can discuss is, with Wisconsin or with Oregon doing what they're doing. Yeah, that's a quality opponent for sure. But this is by far going to be their biggest test of the year. And we talked about Tennessee it being a test, but for Georgia, it's going to be a test for them as well. That's a great, that's a great point.
Yeah, because Georgia, like I said, they've only played Oregon up to this point, while Tennessee, they've played I would think a pretty good Pitt. I mean, they've played a pretty good Pitt team at Pitt. You play at LSU, who was ranked at the time. You play Alabama at home. You play Kentucky at home. Like, I think we know more about who Tennessee is than Georgia by looking at their schedule.
Yep.
Now, I have to, because we wanted to do a little bit of a debate here. So, Trojan, on what parameters is USC wide receiver U over in Alabama, just based on recency in the draft? And Ohio State, goodness gracious. I mean, they've got a claim right now with what they're doing, or even in LSU. That's not to say historically USC hasn't been fantastic. Look, Trojan, you've got to understand something. Whenever I talk about USC, I talk glowingly. And the OU fans in here, I've had some back and forths with them because I am excited about them. But hey, Bama is wide receiver
as a college football fan, you have to appreciate the tradition at USC and what they've done for over the years. And I would argue more for running back U than I would wide receiver U for USC.
Well, this is a good parameter, right? Hall of Fame. I'll grant you that's a good parameter, but it has to be continued, right? I can't see a streak just completely
just have
nosedive,
huge,
but you're not present.
I can hear his argument though I'm not saying they're wide receiver U, but I can hear of why they would even try to make that argument because
well, that's why
they
I
have some pretty good receivers throughout in the NFL. Juju Smith,
100%.
Michael Pittman. You have that I can't ever say his name
Drake
right.
London,
the St. Brown guy at Detroit.
Yeah, you have Drake London
St.
who Brown.
Just came out.
Very good.
You have
very good.
You have the Robert Woods out at Tennessee.
True.
I don't think it's the best wide receiver class that we've seen from college to the NFL in terms of what's currently out there, but they definitely have the argument. They definitely have the argument.
You're in the arena for sure. Yeah.
And this is why instead of shutting it down, I wanted parameters because I was interested, right? Because there's some logic here, right? USC has done some great things, which is why I was very interested in the discussion. We got some Georgia fans. Tennessee is a great team and will be our biggest test for sure.
I like hummus. Ohio State and Bama definitely have a little bit stronger case, I think, for wide receiver U than maybe USC right now.
Right now, I think so, yeah. And hummus, God bless America, man.
Yeah.
When does it end? When does it end with y'all's wide receiver room?
Right.
I mean, we look in the future and y'all are trending for some great wide receivers in the 2024 class. You got some great wide receivers in the 2023 class. Brian Harsin is on fire.
Or no, Hartline.
Hartline. Yeah. God, Brian Harsin is just on
I don't know why somebody is not picking up the phone and trying to get him away from Ohio State.
Well, before I go any further, Ohio State fans, I apologize profusely for what I just said and for what PG just said. We know not what we said. We've been on here for an hour and 30 minutes. So it's, it's some of that coming to bite us in the back. Brian Hartline is not Brian Harsin, and they are furthest from what it could be. And we accidentally just said Hartline.
That, so
no, Drew, you're the angel right here. It's mainly me because I think PG piggybacked off of me. So sincerest apologies. Now, Chicken, thank you for the $5 twice, my man. He says, first and foremost, anybody who thinks Coach Bass isn't good never played ball at a winning program. Completely agree. Secondly, he says, you promised a running back last year. I'm holding you to it. Chicken, now we've had this conversation time and time again. Bama needs all the running backs they can get right now. They need all the running back help they can get. Great room. We saw what happened last year. That depth just tanked with all those injuries. They need that depth.
Wait, Jimmy now is he talking about OU running backs, though? Because OU running backs, we're fine. We got Gavin Sawchuk and Javonte Barnes, and we're going to be getting Stacey Gage next year.
PG, have you heard the status of Javonte at all for tomorrow?
I hear he's just a game time decision, and it's a hammy thing.
Yep,
so with the hamstring, it's so finicky. I would probably say he's out. I would say he's out.
Yeah, you can't mess with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and with Javonte Barnes being young and with the season
long-term implications with the hammy.
Yeah, I'd rather be safe than sorry. You can put Sawchuk out there. Out there.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Running back you will be just fine.
Yeah.
Jimmy says Bama's receiver have not been great this year, but they're coming on. Jimmy, I agree, and that's something I've been echoing. Bama has got the talent. They don't have experience, and the guys that brought in from the transfer portal, they haven't worked out in the least. Tyler Harrell, because of injuries, completely excused. Burton, that's just a failed project, right? Like that has not worked out. I don't think he's the best receiver on the team. I think there's an argument that could be made he's number 3 or 4. It is what it is. Completely agree. It's the young guys, though, Jimmy. It's the young guys. They're the ones to watch. Chicken again with the 5. He says, we need more. You can never have too many running backs, my man. You really can't. If they transfer out, hey, that's a product of it, but you want them. Oklahoma found out last year why that's the case. Alabama found out last year why that's the case. Crazy thing is Alabama. Go ahead.
Chad, I'm with you. Sawchuk is going to be he's going to be a burner, man. I can't wait to see him get some time on the field, but his time is coming for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
can y'all imagine?
They need to wait till this 2024 class with the running backs that OU's offered and is potentially in the running for. You're hearing a lot of good things about Tovanian Mizell, who's currently actually committed to Georgia. But you're hearing a lot of good things about where DeMarco Murray is at in that recruitment, along with Jarek Gibson, who's actually teammates with David Stone. So if David Stone's out there recruiting
for those of you that don't know, DeMarco Murray is one hell of a recruiter. So,
and remember, Stacey Gage is a 5-star running back. He's just being a little underrated right now. So, and Stacey Gage is coming to Oklahoma. That's clear. I know he's taking his OVs everywhere, but he's coming to Oklahoma.
Savage Dog, thank you for the $2. He says, great show, guys. Go Dogs. Hey, like I said, man, I let it out there. I'm picking Georgia to win, not by a lot. I think it's going to be a lot closer than Georgia fans think. I think this is how I'll leave this game, guys. I think this is the best way to put it. I think we leave that game. Georgia gets the win, but we all sit here on Monday and say, man, Tennessee, they're here. They're legit, and that's a really good football team. Hey, I think that's where we're going to sit.
You can't end the stream there. You got to end the stream with this question. Who has the best dog mascot?
Who has
Tennessee
the best
or Georgia?
Mascot? Well, Georgia has a live one there, right?
No, so does Tennessee. So does Tennessee.
Smokey, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, I like Bulldogs.
It's a little skinnier version, it's okay.
It's a Basset Hound, isn't it? Yeah. It's a Basset Hound.
I like Basset Hounds, but I like Bulldogs. I'm not gonna lie. I always wanted, because I used to skateboard a bunch. I always wanted a French Bulldog, and I wanted to name him Rocco, so I could just be skateboarding through Gainesville at night with Rocco.
Hey,
right?
I will say this.
I got a love for Bulldogs.
I'm picking my guy Josh Heupel in Tennessee in this game to win it.
Love it. Great pick.
Yeah, I got Heupel. But I want Savage Dog to come subscribe to me, so I'm going to say the Bulldog's the better dog.
Rick. God bless America, Rick.
I would go with Georgia being the best dog in the one as well. So,
God, Rick, no.
That's not fair.
Bad Rick. Goodness gracious. I grew up on a ranch. I know about that. Yeah. He says, Chicken with another 5. Chicken, my man. Thank you so much. He says, if you get us Bowen, I'll drop 50 for fun. Man, if y'all get Bowen, I think all of Oklahoma is going to go wild. I mean, just great.
We're going to get him. We're going to get both the Bowen brothers and David Hicks. Listen, it's okay. It's okay. OU fans just need to chill out. Chill out.
That's very fair.
What did Aaron Rodgers famous say? Relax. Okay.
Yeah, relax. Listen, right now we're sitting at number 7, right? And all of the haters think that they're right, that OU's class is going to be poor. It's going to be okay. We're still going to end top 3. Just give it time.
Got this.
No, I do want to. Rick, here's something. I don't know if I agree with you this time, man. This feels a little different under Heupel. No, I'm certainly not saying, hey, next year expect Tennessee to be right back there, possibly the number 1 seed out the SEC East, competing with Georgia. They're going to have to replace some things. I hear you. This just feels a little bit different with Heupel. Maybe that's just me. And if it is, I'll certainly own it. I have no fear. Y'all know me at this point, right? One of the things, hey, you can give me credit for one thing. I have no issue admitting when I'm wrong. Happens way too often. Go ask my fiance. But this just feels different. Drew, what do you think? Do you think this feels a little different for Tennessee, or is this kind of one of those ebbs and flows?
I think this weekend is going to be big for Tennessee in this regard, because I think it's going to do a lot, like we were talking about Oklahoma's class, like we were talking about doing other people's recruiting classes and Texas A&M's recruiting class. I think this could potentially be a huge springboard for Tennessee in their recruiting moving forward in the next few years. If they go out and get a big win, and they continue this and somehow get in the playoffs and even catch a win maybe there, or a close loss in the playoffs, that's a huge momentum swing for Tennessee and for their recruiting. And I think as we talked about earlier in the show with respect to OU and A&M and some of these other people, I think for Tennessee, I think this could be a very positive step forward in their recruiting, and springboard them, because they're seeing progress. They're seeing, Tennessee is I think they're back, man. I want to go be a part of this, and I want to get them over the hump. They were in the college football playoff and they, came up short, but I think I could really contribute. And that's why I really want to go to Tennessee and do this. So some of those recruits, they'll start asking those questions in their head and really, really thinking about that. So for me, yeah, it's a huge week for Tennessee in that respect.
So I want to say this right here. Rick says Florida's out recruiting them. They're number 5 in the SEC. Facts over feelings. True, Rick. But what we also have to admit is, when we look, in 2022, they ranked 7th in the SEC. In 2021, they ranked 8th in the SEC in recruiting. 2020, 7th in the SEC in recruiting. In 2019, 7th in the SEC in recruiting. So they haven't been a top 3 SEC team in recruiting, but yet here they are. So typically, Rick, I do hear you, but there are outliers. I mean, you want a great example. You look at what Gary Patterson was able to do in terms of understanding players that fit his scheme, and how sometimes they don't have to be 5 stars for you to get guys that are really impactful football players. That doesn't always work out. And Rick, I do hear you. Like, it's much harder to do it if you're not recruiting at the level of those guys. So you're right there. But they haven't been a top 5 team, and here they are. And Rick, you can say through the transfer portal, but it's not like the transfer portal goes away after this year. The transfer portal still exists after this year. And what we've just seen is Tennessee go toe-to-toe with Alabama, and then we'll see what they do to Georgia, only giving them more credence as to what Josh Heupel is doing, making it a more desirable destination through the transfer portal. So if the transfer portal is the scapegoat, I actually think that works against the greater point we're trying to make here. I think that actually helps Tennessee. Could be wrong, but I also think Nicholas Iamaleava is a great addition. But Rick, normally you're 100% right, man. I just don't know. I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't know. And I think
Tennessee's
it's
going to finish top 10 in the recruiting class this year.
Well, they've got a lot of big battles. They got a lot of big battles.
Because they're still in the running for that edge rusher in Pimba, who I think they have a really good shot at. So, and this is the week. If you go beat Georgia, you show yourself that you're elite. This is it. And you really like Nico. I think Nico is going to be able to be a force in the SEC, because here's the thing: they could prove that not only did they beat Alabama, and if they beat Georgia this week, that they beat Georgia, but they can go to last year and show, hey, look at how close we played Alabama. So we're right there.
Now, here's one thing, Robert, you're right. This is true, and we have to keep this at the forefront of our mind. We're going to talk about this a little bit later. I owe the fiance a date night, so we're going to get out of here after this. No, Rick, you're right. You're 100% right here. You can't build a program off the portal. You are nail on the head right there, my friend. You can build a team 1 year. Sure, you can do that. A program, we haven't seen it just yet. Very good point there, Rick. Very good point. But Robert points it out, we still have to wait and see what happens with the sanctions when it comes to Tennessee with the investigations. That could be big. Guys, super fun tonight. Before we get out of here, as always, I want to let PG, Drew, I want to let y'all take a chance, let everybody know where they can find all y'all's great content, so that way everybody can get more familiar with what you do as well. PG, I'll start with you.
Yeah, y'all can find me on YouTube, Apple, Google, or Spotify, The PG Show, all one word. Or you guys can find me on Twitter, The PG Show _. I put out a lot of great OU content specifically, but we talk about all things college football. We just put up another player interview today with Jonah Laulu, the defensive tackle from Hawaii. Great conversation. Go sit down, listen to that. We got some other great ones coming as well. So come hop in.
Yeah, it's good stuff too. I always listen, and anytime there's OU content out there, I always do it. But for us, we are the Under Official Review podcast. You can find us on those platforms as well: Google, Spotify, Apple. Our YouTube channel we're at UOR_pod, and we do college football across the board. A little college game day type of feel. We'll go through. We'll have our preview from the week before, and then do our recap, from the week before, and then we'll do our preview, previewing all the big games and stuff like that. Just kind of like how we did tonight with Ty. And we're just getting it going. Me and my buddy Zach, and we love doing it. We actually had Ty on last week. Jake Crane was on the show a couple weeks ago as well. But we love talking college football. So anytime I get a chance, it's any platform, it's always a good time.
Jay boy, that now, interesting story. He actually, when I first got started into doing YouTube, I was kind of not sure whether or not I'd be able to actually do this. And he was big, man. I mean, he sent me a message and really kind of gave me the push where he's like, no, man, you got it. You just got to push through it. Awesome to hear somebody, especially for him. He already had a big platform at that time to reach out to someone like myself.
And if
very appreciative of that.
His stuff and what they do over there at Crane and Company, they're great.
Yeah, he didn't need to do that, and that meant a lot to me. Rick, thank you so much for being here this evening. Hey, we love to have college football debates, and we're always aiming at trying to learn something. I look at debate a lot differently than a lot of people do because I've done it so long. Debate is about coming away from a topic with an understanding you didn't previously had far more than it's about wins and losses. Wins and losses are meaningless if you didn't leave with anything. Then you really lost. Love this. Love what we've been able to create here, guys. And you guys are the only reason it is what it is. So thank you so much for being here. Hummus, can't tell you how much that means. Ohio, thank you so much, man. Hope your kids are doing good. And we're not there yet. Teacher, keeps the kids at bay for a while, but we'll be there soon enough. Thank y'all for joining us this evening. We'll see y'all Monday to recap all of the week's action. Until then, enjoy your weekend. That's it. See you. Now we have the spin.